Cuties, and the Nature of Innocence. My YouTube friend Giga Vega watched Cuties so we wouldn't have to. He compiled a thorough scene-by-scene synopsis of the movie, basically a Cliff Notes of the film. Thank you, Giga. The link to his video will be in the description below. So now that I am informed about the story itself and how the overt underage sexuality ties in, I have a few thoughts I'd like to share. First off, French cinema seems to have no issues with what we Americans consider immoral and potentially illegal underage depictions of adult themes. I lived in Europe where they considered Americans downright puritanical, and that was not a compliment. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that at least in the 1970s when I lived in Europe, that was the mindset. And I'll offer you an example. I remember watching on cable TV a French film entitled Get Out Your Handkerchiefs. This movie was made in 1978, starring Gerard Depardieu, who was a leading French actor who went on to become, for a time, a huge international star and big box office even here in the States. So this is what I found on IMDb. And here is the synopsis of the film. A worried husband finds a lover for his depressed wife, but she falls in love with a bullied 13-year-old math prodigy and wants to have his baby. And the reviews were largely glowing. Complex, very funny, sad, very French look at love and sexual dynamics, with terrific acting all around. Gerard Depardieu plays a man who truly loves his wife, but can't understand her or her depression, so he decides to get her a lover to cheer her up. But it doesn't work, and now the two men are bewitched and befuddled by the sad, repressed Solange. Ultimately, only a love affair with a 13-year-old boy, who in many ways is the most mature character in the film, gives her joy. Anyone remember Mary Kay Letourneau? I guess if she and Billy lived in France, they'd have lived happily ever after, surrounded by a supportive and understanding community. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying that's right. But my understanding, gleaned from having lived in Europe, is that America is still a very young society, and that the more ancient cultures still have ties with the old days and the old ways when the average human lifespan was middle age and young women were married and bearing children from the onset of puberty out of necessity. There is a vast gulf between a 12-year-old maiden from Marseille in 1700 and a 12-year-old girl from Miami today. About the only thing they would have in common is the rush of pubescent hormones. But like the fight or flight mechanism, which designed to react to the saber-toothed tiger rather than modern stressors, brings on unneeded problems, so it is with our biological imperatives. The inherent sexuality once needed to fruitfully multiply the tribe exists now for no other purpose but the pleasure principle. That being said, it is my contention that a child is innocent until it is corrupted. Meaning, in my opinion and my experience, a child is not likely to act out in an overtly sexual way unless something has happened to spawn, to ignite, to generate this overtly sexual persona where it previously did not exist. For example, my little brother, who went on to become an opioid addict, was, at age 10, acting out in an overtly sexual way. We were all wondering, why is he acting out in such an overtly sexual way? Well, it turns out that he had been molested. That's why. And if we'd known back in the 1980s what we know today, we'd have been able to read the signs and possibly been able to help him before it became too late. Cuties, at least in my perception, based upon Jigga Vegas Cliff Notes, is a story very different from what I'd expected, and also very troubling and highly flawed, made even more troubling because of how highly flawed it is. The story is about a French Somali Muslim girl caught between a clash of cultures and going through a painfully stressful situation at home. The fact that she rebels by acting out is a no-brainer, really. The issue here, and the device which the film exploits, is that she acts out in an overtly sexual manner. And not only is her behavior overtly sexual, but he becomes increasingly aggressive, narcissistic, manipulative, and violent. The dopamine rush from social media likes as an incentive rings true only up to a point, as most of us are fine with selfies of our faces, not our genitals. Netflix advertises that Amy joins a twerking dance troupe, but the Cuties weren't actually twerking until Amy herself introduces those routines into the act, even teaching the other girls how it's done. Now, when a child has their innocence, adult themes and adult behaviors seem foreign, weird, and icky. When innocent, you have no context nor capacity to comprehend, let alone internalize the energy of overt, adult sexual behavior. Such a child might play dress-up or mimic their desired role models in a superficial and childish way, because a child can only apprehend adult concepts with a child's limited understanding. A troubled child can certainly fall in with a bad crowd and go down the wrong path. A child can certainly misinterpret things and act under the wrong assumptions. But in my opinion, based upon my experience, is that a child is not inclined to make a 180-degree transformation into something wholly unrecognizable without a gross violation traumatic enough to split their psyche into generating this alter ego. Now, that's what makes the overt sexuality of Cuties so repulsive, even just the idea of it, to so many, because empathetic human beings recognize the fingerprints of evil all over the damn thing. It goes beyond the uncanny valley. Like a gut punch, we feel how wrong this is on a multitude of levels. There is a scene where the girls get into trouble for trespassing, and Amy gets them out of the jam by performing her suggestive dance. This, I assume, shows her the value of behaving this way, but she takes it to the next stage and beyond. Amy is able to influence the other girls up to a point, but even they have some boundaries, while Amy appears to have none. She pushes her rival off a pier, leaving her to drown. Fortunately, the other girl finds a buoy to cling to, while Amy joins the rest of the Cuties for a cringe-inducing twerk fest worthy of Cardi B. The movie ends with Amy seemingly contrite, having supposedly learned a lesson, reverting to her modest pre-twerk persona and reclaiming her childhood. But in reality, this would be impossible. This is one genie you can't put back in the bottle. If this were real life and Amy a real girl, her monster persona, and it was indeed a monster, would only be going dormant for a time, unless she were to receive some concentrated professional help. If Cuties is intended as an artistic statement, a meditation on the evils of the corrupting influence of a degraded society on pre-adolescence, it misses its mark. Kids, being kids, have always done dumb things in order to curry favor and gain status with the other kids. But Amy's quest to be alpha bitch was disturbingly extreme. The explanation that all of this acting out was brought on merely by stress and unhappiness at home seems too simplistic for the suspension of disbelief. But hey, that's the way they wrote it. Was the point of the movie that Amy was too young to comprehend the very wrongness of her overtly sexual actions? That alone makes the act of watching this exploitation film, let alone someone casting it, directing it, filming it, and putting it out there for the whole world to consume, even more heinous. At the end of the day, what was their intent in depicting children being overtly sexual other than an opportunity to depict children being overtly sexual? A child's exploitation is a tragedy, like what happened to my little brother. It is something to be mourned and prevented at all costs, and not the stuff of entertainment. These people are sick. That's all I have for today. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Please share. Take care of yourselves. After Arts Out. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, I'd be delighted to have you. Your support will help keep the content fresh and always evolving. Thanks again for your support. After Arts Out.